This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, having technology, using technology, helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW.
I'm doing this because this is the hardest thing I know how to do. And I want to be happy in that space for the next 20 years. And then, if my daughter's stupid enough to want to be a chef, she can have it. But, I just want to make sure whenever I walk in there that everything that I look at is exactly the way I wanted it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. There have been some professionals on the cusp of a dream only to have COVID come along and pull the rug out from under their feet. But as the last few years have shown, this uncertain period of time has also given pause to many, created opportunity, and allowed the now or never mindset to kick in. What's emerging is some wonderful offerings that may have never come to light without this shift in thinking. Nigel Ward is the owner of soon-to-be-open Passeggiata. Nigel, how are you?
Good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Good. Last time we caught up with you, you had to sort of forego your dream and you joined Merivale Group with your cello, but now the dream's back on track.
That's right. Yeah, I think I said in the last one that maybe when I'm 50 and my knees go creaky, I'll buy a love restaurant. Well, that sort of accelerated quite a lot.
Well, take us through the steps. How did you find yourself in a position after all that's happened in the last year and a half, to get it back on track?
Well, I guess, we sort of talked about this last time, that sort of I'd lost a bit of confidence after selling the restaurant and sort of was looking for spaces, and then, just pre-COVID had chosen that site in Chippendale, which fell over. Working at Merivale was a great experience purely, and simply because I was in charge of a big team, and it was great. We were busy and it was pumping and everything was fantastic. But after sort of that Christmas rush, I guess I sort of felt that there's more that I can offer than just being a chef, Yeah.
So what did you activate to make the change? And tell us about finding the site and re-energizing this idea.
I think I looked at a space. I was, like I said, after the Christmas rush, I guess, because it was such a challenge and a push uphill. And then in the new year, everything kind of goes back to, normalness. We'd sort of done the challenge, and then it was just kind of cooking and, coming up with new recipe ideas. So I sort of started to get itchy feet. And started looking around, and I actually just lived down the road from Waverley, where the restaurant is going to be. And I looked at a space for lease, which wasn't that exciting, to be honest. I've probably looked at about 500 over the last 4 years. And I turned around and there was a for sale sign on this old heritage sort of Victorian building across the road. So walked over and peered in the window, and they had this old pressed metal ceilings and this beautiful old shop front. And it was the exact dimensions that I'd sort of been looking at. Problem was it was for sale, not for lease. So fortunately, being an employee of a company versus having my own company, I didn't need, years worth of financial records. So I rang a mate who's a mortgage broker, and I think I saw it on the Monday and I bought it on the Tuesday.
Wow. How did it feel making that decision and that huge investment, given the turbulence of the last year and a half?
Well, I think that's what needed to happen. And even without COVID, I think that's why I sort of committed in Chippendale, is that I sort of made every excuse possible under the sun about a site not being right, or, something being wrong with it, or, the cool room's in the wrong spot, or this or that. And it sounds crazy, but I was just kind of like, you know what? If I buy it, I can't turn back. I can't change my mind. I can't find excuses. I've just got to go for it.
Tell us about this. Sorry, go on.
the other thing about it is, I change my mind a lot, and I like to, move the pasta cooker from the left to the right, and then, move the furniture around and do this. And it's just, I guess, it will hopefully be refreshing not to be at the mercy of a landlord. Well, except the landlord's actually half my wife, so I better be a bit careful. But at least you're sort of free to make decisions and just go for it, which I think is I've never really taken instruction very well, so it's a very expensive way of doing it, but hopefully it'll all work out in the end.
What sort of state was the building in when you took it over, and what have you had to do to make it ready for being a restaurant?
Well, it looked good. It looked really good. And then, kind of you peel back the layers of 130 years of being a shop and, you find a few little surprises. We actually just found it was originally a hardware store and then it became a bait and tackle shop. And we were just pulling the floorboards up yesterday and we found an old telescopic Japanese fishing rod hidden under the floorboards. So hopefully it was really expensive. It can contribute to the renovation costs. But yeah, I've renovated a house before and like everything, it always turns into something much bigger than you thought it would be. But it's basically a full gut and rebuild, but we had to keep these pressed metal ceilings purely because that's what I first saw, which inspired me to kind of buy it. And so that's been very expensive, kind of trying to wire a shop and a restaurant, with 3-phase power and all that kind of stuff around and not penetrate a roof. It's a bit of a challenge, but it's coming together. We've got the guys laying tiles and the timber floor guys coming in tomorrow. And hopefully we finish the bulk of the sort of hard building by Christmas. And then I'm going to take the wife and daughter to Fiji for a week because I won't see them for a couple of years after that. And then probably thinking around February or March at the latest, hopefully, which hopefully will be a good time with overseas travellers kind of coming back into town and propping up the workforce a little bit.
I've seen all sorts of images on Instagram with the backyard being dug up and all sorts of things going on. What did you have to do to the site, given it had never been a restaurant? That's
right. So, if I can give any of your listeners some advice, don't ever buy a building and want to have a restaurant there unless it's got existing use rights. Because, basically we, the front of the shop is lower than the back of the shop and the back of the shop is where the sewer is. So we can't really make water run uphill. So we had to actually dig out by hand into 3 metres of sandstone to connect the grease trap into the back laneway. That's one thing. And then also probably having to be wheelchair compliant in a 130-year-old building has put up its fair share of challenges. But, we've kind of finally dealt with all those things and we can sort of focus on making it pretty.
Has your vision of this restaurant changed over the last couple of years from when you were looking for a restaurant originally to now?
A little bit, but I mean, funnily enough, this space is basically a carbon copy of what Chippendale was, and I spent 6 months sort of working on Chippendale and developing a plan of how I was going to do it. And this is basically the same layout. With the addition of a backyard where I can, pot around and pick tomatoes on my day off. The difference being that I probably didn't consider, and maybe I'm a bit stupid for doing this, is that I'm actually building 2 kitchens. So I've got one upstairs and one downstairs, purely because we may have one offering across the whole restaurant, but upstairs can function independently as either a function space or, I'm sort of hoping of doing that thing we did at the Argyle when we first opened that, where it's that concept of the meal. You just come in at 7:00, there's no out by time, and it's a 4-course set menu, and you just sit down and order a nice bottle of wine and just, feel like you're being serviced well, and, that essence of hospitality of not feeling like the owner's got his hand in your pocket all the time trying to get another table in, actually just sit and relax. Whereas, and so having the upstairs kitchen means that, one chef and a kitchen hand can kind of, pump that out, and, downstairs can kind of just keep functioning as a la carte. But we'll see. That's the idea. But at least, upstairs it's got some windows looking out on the garden, so it might just be a really lovely, expensive place to roll pasta.
Well, what surprised you about sort of owning the building and the challenges involved in creating a restaurant?
Not a lot. I mean, I've kind of done it once. I guess, pushing back on the builder's actually a mate of mine, and they always want to do things perfect. And he's really angry because this building, they built all the internal walls square to the street, and the street's on like a 10-degree angle, which means, and builders don't sleep very well if they don't get everything perfectly square. And I've just said, just make it crooked, mate. Like, it's a 130-year-old building. It's never going to happen. So just kind of maybe giving him a little push to not worry so much. I had to say the other day, like, I'm not going to live here. But then equally, he sort of said, what do you want to do here? And I'm like, shit, I'm going to walk down this pathway every day for the next 20 years. And if we don't do it properly, I'm probably going to look at that and just be like, fuck, I wish we'd done that the right way. So let's just do it. So kind of just having to think about absolutely everything. And I'm sort of the project manager. So, got myself a ute and I'm doing my little trips to the tip and all that kind of stuff, and, picking up stuff for the renderers. And it's actually quite funny that builders don't really communicate very well, like the different trades. We dug up all the plumbing and had this, like, basically it was just all dirt inside the internals of the restaurant because we had to get everything under the slab before we poured it. So all the electrical, all the plumbing. Wow. We dug the plumbing up, laid it all, and then they said, yeah, you can backfill it. So we got the floor level again. And then the Sparkies came in, they're like, we got to dig it all up again and lay all the conduits. It's like, oh God, maybe you guys should have a chat with each other. So sort of my job is kind of trying to get everyone to talk to each other, which, isn't too far away from, running a restaurant or being a chef, I guess.
Italian cuisine has run threads through your career. What will you be doing at the new restaurant?
Well, yeah, that's what we talked about last time, about having space. And I mean, I'm, like I said, 2 kitchens and a backyard and all that. So we got so much, we got too much space. We might even do a bakery in the back shed one day. Mm-hmm. So we'll be doing basically Sagra, I guess, but with no limit. Like we can get a cow. We can we can make wine in the backyard. We can grow some lovely veg. So that the essence of Saga, I guess, will be evident mainly in the upstairs dining room. And I think my experience at sort of William Street and even Uccello to a degree, just having a little bit more, a bit more of a refined approach rather than just kind of, Shaw Moran style, just slap bang on the plate and, as long as it's tasty. We might make downstairs just a bit prettier, and more progressive. And upstairs will just be that, the place I want to go to on a Saturday where it's just you're on a table of 6 and, out comes the antipasti all at once and then lots of pastas and then a whole lamb shoulder in the middle of the table and you just bog in.
You've been doing this build of the restaurant through lockdowns, but everything's opened up again. What's the feeling like in society and around the suburb that you're in?
I'm wearing tradie clothes and, walking 100 metres up the road from the restaurant, and people stop me in the street. They're like, I can't wait for you to open. It's unbelievable. I'm like, just like, what? And I've got reservations requests for next September.
Wow.
Yeah, and people wanting to book their parties in June and for 120 people. I'm like, I haven't even got a license yet. I don't know how many people we're going to get in. No, it's been amazing. And I think what's nice about it is that rather than sort of, like, we've ripped the guts out of the building, but we've, as I said, we kept the pressed metal ceilings and we're keeping the original stairs, and we've actually rebuilt the shop facade to look exactly how it did in, 1890 or whatever, with a bit of a sort of a Roman edge, thanks to Tim Leveson, who's doing the design. So he's like, you got to stand out. And so he just comes to me with this yellow colour that looks like Big Mac cheese, like there's that old sort of Roman ochre. And he's like, paint the whole shop front like this. And it actually looks amazing. But I was kind of like, all right, sure. I guess that's been quite a nice thing, is to actually, this is impossible for me to do on my own. So to actually put faith in people that know what they're doing and just sort of say, this is my idea and this is my vision for what I want to do. Can you, give me some ideas? And they came back with a lookbook, and I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. I want it to be kind of, want it to look cool and a little bit modern, but also be homely and, bring together, I guess, comfort and the heritage of the building and, all that sort of stuff, so that it's a space that, feels nice to sit in and hopefully, the food does the fit out justice and not the other way around.
You've had quite a few changes in the last couple of years. What sort of impact has it had on the way you see what you want to do in the food service industry and also your cooking?
I think the thing that I've really thought about quite a lot is just that concept of hospitality. I think, Saga, I'm not going to lie, I think I was quite arrogant in the way that I sort of approached it. If people sort of asked for a well-done steak, I'd just say, no, you can have chicken. It's not really the best way to sort of be hospitable by ostracising customers. I think definitely that concept of hospitality is definitely, I learned something from the Fratelli guys, that you just, within reason, and even from Maryvale too, like if the customer wants something, they're there for an experience, and you've got to do your best to make them enjoy their night. And I mean, that's more evident now than it probably ever was after, spending 4 months at home with your family or homeschooling or Jesus, all that lovely stuff. So I think, people are coming out, and if you're coming out to go to a meal, it's sort of like the stakes are higher because it's like, well, this is my first meal since I've been out, been at home for 4 months, so better be good. And yeah, I guess that definitely that spirit of generosity, I've sort of been reflecting a lot about, my mentors, Sean Moran and Lucio, and their spirit of generosity, and I guess the fact that they have the self-confidence. It's a fast-paced world, but they're, sort of slow-paced people, and they both had restaurants totaling, 60 years, 30 years each, roughly here and there between them. And that's because they're hospitable people. And my parents went to Lucio's, and I hadn't been there for 2 years, and they comped half the bill just to kind of say thanks for all your hard work. Or, Sean's the most sustainable chef I know, and to the point where he's like, I'm just going to keep all the old mussel shells and vongole, and I'm going to build a whale out of them and put it on the ceiling of the dining room just because I can, and because that's what makes me happy. And I guess that is sort of what I'm trying to approach with this, is that this has got to be a space that makes me happy to walk in there every day. And like I said before, the only way that's going to happen is if we build it from the ground up, and I'm not at the mercy of a landlord. If I want to make some changes, I can. But from a customer perspective, it's got to reflect everything that I've learnt, whether it's, killing pigs in Piemonte or shepherding goats in Tuscany, and, all the stuff that I sort of, deep dived into over the years. This is hopefully going to be a reflection of that.
You mentioned you got itchy feet when you were cooking at Maryvale and you wanted to do more. How do you see your role with the new restaurant? Will you be in the kitchen less?
So I think at the beginning we're only going to open 4 days. And I think my role will, I live 5 minutes down the road from the restaurant, and my kids just started going to school. So and that's just up the road. So I guess through the day I'll probably be there and doing prep like I used to at Saga, and then probably going to do school runs, and then probably be picking broad beans at the kitchen bench, and then her mother can come and pick her up, and then I'll throw a shirt on and get out the front and sell the stuff that people don't want to try, or or talk to them about wine or whatever. But that's pretty much my role at Sagra, except this time I'm bringing in some help from the beginning. So Ryan, my head chef, worked under me at Maryvale, and he's come on board. He's actually down working with Huey at the Argyle at the moment, and so I'm just sort of taking him around all the places that I've worked, so he kind of gets it, so we can kind of, I guess, retrain the way he approaches things. But he's a lovely, reliable guy, and as you know, the staff are kind of hard to come by. So I've got this motley crew of sort of guys that have, like Michael, who bought Sagra from me, who's since sold his share. He's doing all the website development and stuff. And they got a couple of other chefs, on call. As long as you can be free on Friday and Saturday nights in March or Feb, that'd be great, just in case we're in the shit. So I said, in a way, yeah, I'll hopefully be cooking a little bit less, but I'll be definitely involved in every aspect of it. But knowing me, I'll be up there at 6 every morning and going home at 1 a.m, much to my wife's displeasure, I'm sure.
Italian cuisine has deep roots in the culinary history of Australia, but it's also had a real renaissance in the last decade, and particularly the last 5 years. How do you see where it's headed and where it is?
It's pretty exciting. I mean, it's really exciting. I think the the degree of caution that needs to be shown maybe is that Italian approach of, like if you make pasta with broccoli, I remember I was in Piemonte and the lady who was making it and she said, half a clove of garlic. And I was like, why only half a clove? Why didn't you put 4 cloves in? She's like, well, because this is pasta with broccoli, not pasta with garlic. And maybe just that essence of restraint, in the era of Thermomixes and all that sort of stuff. Like when I was at William Street, all the guys laughed at me because I didn't know how to turn a Thermomix on. I've got a combi at Passeggiata. I still don't know how to work that thing, but that's what all the young guys want. And everyone laughed at me at William Street because I couldn't use a Thermomix. And so I ordered a pig the next day and chopped it up in about 5 minutes. And everyone was like, well, can you show me that? I'm like, yeah, I don't know how the buttons work, but I know my way around a knife. Yeah. So, I mean, to answer your question, I think it's got to be, people need to learn when to draw the line. That's the beauty of Italian food, is the simplicity. And I think with all the modern gadgets, there's no one's steaming an octopus in a plastic bag in a combi and then char grilling it on a Japanese barbecue in Italy. They might cook it in seawater with some old wine corks in it for some bizarre reason, and then hang it out and then cook it over fire. And that just to me seems like a much simpler process.
You briefly mentioned some experiences over the years in Italy. Do you have any stories that have really influenced your path in regards to that deep dive that you've done into the cuisine?
I got a few. I remember, so there's 2. I'll give you 2. I'll give you the first one quickly. So I watched that show, Jamie's Italy, right? And he went to that island in Sicily with that crazy old man who goes fishing, and if there's no fish, any decent fish, he just doesn't open. And so I was like, I'm going to go there. And it's like, it's off the west coast of Trapani. It's they have to bring in water from Naples every month, and there's about 100 people living on the island. And
wow.
I wanted to go there to eat his food. And he does that concept of the meal, that 4-course set menu. And so I'm upstairs on my own, on my little food odyssey in 2009, eating dinner. And this table, I didn't speak any Sicilian and no one spoke any English. And I'm there eating, and then this big family says, basically, I'm guessing, what are you doing there on your own? Come and join us, And I started chatting to them in my horrible Italian, and they realised I was a chef. And within 5 minutes, the owner comes up and he's like, I heard you're a chef. I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, what are you doing up here? Get your ass in the kitchen. And I stayed there for a month cooking some of the best fish of my life. He gave me a little... That his daughter was, she was pretty good to look at, and she worked in the kitchen, and he just said, I got one rule, that if you touch my daughter, I'll chop your balls off. And he got me a little flat just next to the restaurant, and we go out fishing and then come back and just put on like people would fly in from Milan and stuff. He used to have a 2-star restaurant in Milan, I think, and then he just moved back home. And that was an amazing experience. I think the second one was in Piemonte. That was in 2013. And we're at Valle Unite, which is that sort of, everyone knows it for its natural wines. But we went there as woofers, as, the worldwide work on organic farms. And because they make amazing salami, and they raise all their own animals. They raise all the fodder, they grow the fodder for their own animals. It's a cooperative of 40 people. They've got its own butcher shop, bakery, and it's just for the people that live there. Everyone eats together in a big hall. It's an amazing experience. We got there on the first night quite late and went into the butcher and got a piece of meat and about 6 litres of wine and drank it all. And then, we were pretty rough the next morning at 4:30, or we got a knock on the door and they said, rightio, get to work. We went up in the dark and had to dispatch a 1-ton bull, and then take him down, and we had to take off all the hide in one piece because they were going to get it, put it to the tannery, and then use it as a rug. And then later that day, on the worst hangover of my life, I'm in the Trypperia, which is this tiny little room with a ceiling like 2 meters high, basically like being in a cupboard with a boiling pot of water and the tripe from that cow, and you got to take each leaf over and scrape the grass that the cow was just, or the bull was just chewing the day before from it. And that was just probably the most horrific food experience of my life. And I managed to keep the wine down, but I was pretty close. It was pretty rough. And then later on in the day, I was ringing my brother from the balcony and they dispatched a pig, and it was pretty rough sound. And my brother's like, "What's that noise?" Oh, that's number 3 for the day. That was a bit of an eye-opener. But, like I said, they used every single bit of it. It was phenomenal.
I know you've got many more stories from your journeys over there, but has it been a challenge translating that sort of history and all of the techniques passed over generations into the context of our dining culture?
100%. And the reason for that, and, like cooking at Trullo in London, we get those Amalfi lemons and the Tardivo, like I was saying. But here in Australia, unfortunately, everything's like the way people farm here is obviously much larger scale. And that's obviously to do with the size of our country. But everything's kind of geared towards stackability in supermarkets and cool rooms. And I mean, you go to a street corner in Italy to the Alimentari, and the peaches that are there or the tomatoes, they've never seen a fridge, and they taste like sunshine, and they probably won't see a fridge. And the next day they're going to go in a dessert or into a pasta. And so the food has this life of its own, it doesn't need refrigeration. And I think Australian produce is so geared towards, stackability and shelf life. It's, you got to sort of manipulate it a bit, like I was talking about the pasta broccoli. That tasted so good because we picked the broccoli that morning, there was still frost on it. And pasta broccoli, when I do it here, it's got to go anchovies and chili and garlic and flavour laying and stuff just to make it not taste like it's been sitting in a supermarket cool room for 4 weeks,
What have you loved about building this restaurant?
Oh, God, where do I start? The Roman arches upstairs that we've made from scratch out of brickwork, pulling all the old walls off that were part of the old shop and finding these original bricks that are just like the way they were 130 years ago. So just letting the building sort of talk to me about how I should design it, and having that sort of a relationship with the designers where we can just change our mind 100 times, and it's an organic process, and it really feels like it's taking shape. There's not one part of it where I've had to sort of say, we're going to compromise there. It's just like, you know what, I'm doing this because this is the hardest thing I know how to do, and I want to be happy in that space for the next 20 years. And then, if my daughter's stupid enough to want to be a chef, she can have it. But, I just want to make sure whenever I walk in there that everything that I look at is exactly the way I wanted it. And you may as well do it now because, it's a fucker of a job to rip up a concrete slab and start again.
How do you think the venue will influence your food?
Well, there's so there's about 35 people downstairs, 30 upstairs, and about 25 in the backyard when I get, which won't happen until next summer when I hopefully have a bit of income and can afford to build it. But that staircase is something I'm probably going to run up and down about 100 times a day. That's one of the reasons for that second kitchen upstairs. The staircase is rather steep, and I think we're going to have to, that's sort of why we've adjusted the offering around the space, in that we'll have that homely sort of, concept of the meal upstairs, where once people are up there, they're there for the night, and downstairs can be a little bit more fluid. And yeah, I mean, I think having the garden's going to be great. I mean, I've always loved gardening and growing veg. It's just that my French wife wants to live in the inner city, so it makes it a bit challenging. So an easy way to fix that is to go and spend a shitload of money building a restaurant so that you've got your own veggie patch.
Well, you've spent many years on this project one way or another. How's it going to feel when you open the doors in the sort of first quarter of next year?
I reckon we're going to go down because I won't have cooked for like a year. I reckon the first night's going to be pretty rough. So I think what we'll do is that's what I was saying before. The beauty is that we've got 3 spaces, right? So I think we might just maybe we'll just start with the ground floor, and we'll build it around, Huey, my mate who's got the Argyle, he's like, just build it around your team. That's why we're sort of only opening 4 days a week in the beginning, and maybe just downstairs, and then we can do Friday, Saturday night upstairs, and I can hide out in the kitchen and just make the food that I want to cook. And yeah, I think that's a sane way of doing it versus just sort of saying, let's open 3 different spaces with 2 kitchens, with 3 different menus that all change daily, all at the same time. That's probably not the best idea.
Well, Nigel, there's many people looking forward to this opening and can't wait to see what you do. I've loved catching up with you again on Deep in the Weeds today. Please keep in touch. Good luck, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, mate. Appreciate talking to you again.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.